Hello and welcome to Creating a Family, talk about adoption, foster care, and kinship care. I'm Tracy Whitney, your host for today's interview about trauma-informed therapy. I am the content manager of Creating a Family and now the host of both of the Creating a Family podcasts. Whether you're new here or you're a regular listener, I am really glad you made time for today's interview. Our guest today is Kelly Radenbush. She is the executive director of the Sparrow Fund, a nonprofit in the Philadelphia area that cares for foster and adopted children and their grown-ups in a number of ways. This includes specialized therapeutic services for foster and adoptive families, and she is also a child and family therapist with an MA degree in counseling and a clinical infant and early childhood mental health certificate. That's a mouthful.
It really is.
And to top it all off, she's an adoptive mom also. We're going to talk today about trauma-informed therapy, how to find the right fit for your family, how do you know what services you need, and Kelly is uniquely positioned to talk with us about these questions. So let's dive right in. The first question is kind of the one that most families are asking themselves when they come to this conversation. What are the common reasons that a family would seek therapy for either their child or for their whole family unit?
I think there's a lot of different things that draw families to even consider getting help. Probably most commonly that we see is a behavioral concern, whether that is at home or at school, that behavior is getting in the way in some way, socially, relationally, school performance, something like that. But it could also be sibling relationships, parent, like a felt connection or lack of connection with their kid. Maybe they're sensing that their kid is dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of sadness. Maybe there's conversations that are coming up about birth family or history or country or place of origin that the parents don't feel completely equipped to handle. And so that could prompt why they're reaching out. There's so many reasons that could draw someone to even consider accessing a clinician or help for their family.
Okay. If you're uncertain about when you should be seeking therapy, what are some things that parents could be looking for or thinking about that would kind of maybe push them to that phone call or to that online contact information?
I guess I would say like a sense of stuckness.
Oh, that's good.
I don't know if that's a word. I'm making that word up, but
we're going to make it up.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that word. Like a sense of like, we're not moving forward and we're feeling stuck in whatever area it may be. Sometimes parents reach out proactively. Like they're not maybe feeling that sense of stuckness, but they're wanting to do everything they can for their kid. And some parents really see therapeutic services as like an expression of being a good parent, of just like, hey, nothing is particularly wrong. We just want to make sure we're not missing anything. And that's okay too. So it doesn't need to be that you're like in crisis or like feeling some sort of urgency of like, we're in over our head. We don't know what we're doing. It could be that you're like, hey, I just want to tick all the boxes and make sure that we're doing everything we can as parents to support our kid and help them to be like the best version of themselves. That would also be okay.
Yeah, I would love more families to do that on the proactive side, right?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing to consider is a lot of clinicians have pretty long waiting lists.
Oh, yes.
We feel that, right? Yeah, we feel that. Yep. So like sometimes if you think you might be wanting some help, it may be better to be a little more proactive and not wait until you're like desperate to have help, because you might have to wait a good while, unfortunately, before you can actually get that going.
Yeah. So is there a difference between therapy and counseling? And how do you determine what is the right path for your family?
This is a question that I think a lot of professionals kind of get into the nitty gritty about. The reality is, yes, there's a difference, but in actual practice and how we use the words, like as lay people, as families, we use them pretty interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it tends to be more regional of like what areas are saying therapy versus counseling, because some regions, some states, the word counseling is protected legally because it has to be a licensed, credentialed, like professional counselor
Okay.
who can use that term. So you may see therapy doesn't have that same kind of legal shield around it because
Okay.
therapy is used in so many different fields. We're speech
Right.
therapist, occupational therapist,
Gotcha.
massage therapist. Like we
Right.
use that term more broadly. So in actuality, the terms are pretty interchangeable
Okay.
of how we use them, but
Mm-hmm.
professionals might discriminate and use different terms based on their own credentials.
Right. I had never even considered that before.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you
It's
for clearing that up.
for
Yeah.
most people though, we're using it in the same
Right.
way. Yeah.
Right. So when you're at that point where you've decided it's time to seek some professional help, whether it's in crisis or you're proactively doing so, what type of professional should you be looking for?
This is also a pretty wide range, not just because there's different professionals who can provide counseling,
Mhm.
but you may not need like clinical therapeutic help. It could be that you could access someone through your adoption agency who could
Mm.
provide some scaffolding or some coaching, and maybe that's enough. Like that maybe you don't need something like long term that's more clinical. Some people might seek out a parent coach, someone who may not have the credentials as a therapist or counselor, but someone who knows this area who could support you. Some people might access someone at their church or faith body who could come
Mhm.
alongside them to help with something. So there's like some options for people who may not be as like the formal counseling. Now, if you're
Mhm.
looking for something a bit more clinical, that could be a social worker, that could be a psychotherapist, that could be a psychiatrist. Typically, psychiatrists don't provide like a more holistic therapeutic type of
Mhm.
relationship, but some do. Some do. So, like, that could be an option. Certainly, a licensed professional counselor, child life specialist might be able to provide some support. It's so diverse. That's why
Yeah,
I'm like,
it
even
sounds
that
it.
question is
Right.
like weighted because it's not like one type of person who can be a helper. There's lots of helpers who might be able to give you some support. It just depends on what you feel like you need. Is this a parenting, like you want the support as a parent?
Right.
Or do you feel like your child needs to be working with someone? It could be different.
So actually, that answer, even just in my parental experience, feels like a lot of weight lifted off. It kind of opens the gates a little bit
Absolutely.
to be more creative in the solutions that we're seeking for our kids. So I
Sure. I
appreciate
mean, it's
the
like
range of diversity
it's a
there.
little bit of both, right?
Right.
Because like
Right.
there's not one right way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That is both freeing and terrifying, right?
Exactly.
Because
Yes,
like
that is true.
I really like manuals. I really like right ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me what to do and I will do it. I like following the right way. This is not that way. Which, yeah, that is freeing because you can think creatively about like what is it that we feel like we need and who do we already have around us who
Mm-hmm.
may be able to provide some of that. And if that's not enough, where do we go to find something more?
Right.
But also that means you have to be like thinking and creative about it. And sometimes I'm like, please just tell me what to do.
I
Right?
resonate with that for sure. Yes, there's
Yeah.
definitely times that, when you're in this journey of trying to support your children the very best that you can and give them all the resources that you know can be of such value, sometimes the plethora of choices is overwhelming. But again, it's interesting to hear and helpful to hear that
Yeah.
the plethora of choices exist. So,
Yes. Now that's not the case. That's not the case for everyone in every part of the world. And I,
right,
I
right.
recognize that. And I recognize that you all have an audience who is all over the world.
Right.
So, like,
Right.
where I am in the Philadelphia area, there is a plethora of resources. But even in this area, not everyone experiences that. Even in this area, some people may feel like, I don't feel like there's a plethora of resources at my disposal. So, and there may be people who are listeners to your podcast who feel like, okay, that makes sense, but I don't have access to all the people that you just named. So that's why I said, like, consider who it is who's already around you.
Yeah.
And then start to explore. If that is not enough, then start to explore the next kind of ring around you. Like, who else
Right.
exists that we can access? Yeah.
Right. Let me pause here for a moment and let you know that when you leave us a favorable rating or a review, not only are you letting us know that we brought you content that your family needs, you're also letting others know that the information we are bringing is valuable to strengthen all families. Please consider leaving us a rating or a short review wherever you are listening to this podcast and help us strengthen all kinds of adoptive, foster, and relative caregiving families. Thanks so much, and now back to our interview. Let's talk about what makes a therapist trauma-informed, because we are parents and caregivers who understand that our kids have experienced some really hard things up to this moment where we've decided it's time to get some help. So what makes a therapist or provider trauma-informed? And then we're going to talk a little bit about, from that, the outflow of that is what's the difference between being adoption competent and being adoption informed related to being trauma informed.
Sure. I'm not going to have a great answer to your question. And I admit that. And part of the reason is because trauma has become a bit of a buzzword.
Mm-hmm.
And in all honesty, I am really grateful for that. Like, I am very grateful that people are talking about trauma, that popular books about trauma are on the bestseller list, that it is way more commonly used. It was a term that was clinical years ago, and now it's a word that's being talked about a lot in the kitchen. It goes from clinical to the kitchen of like,
Right.
just, this is a word we're all using. But in some ways that's hard because I think a lot of people are using the word trauma in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone says they're trauma informed, we don't entirely know what that means. There's not like, I can't answer your question to say, well, if someone calls themselves trauma informed, that means they've gone through this class. No, that doesn't exist. There's no one class that is making clinicians trauma informed. That doesn't exist. That's not a credential that is universally accepted. I
Right.
would pay attention to someone who's saying that they're trauma informed because at least they know that it matters.
Mm-hmm.
I would also want to assume, I'm going to assume that someone who's using the term trauma informed to describe themselves is going to have integrated into their practice that our histories matter, that our experiences, our life stories have impacted us physically, emotionally, in all sorts of ways that impact our functioning and our relationships going forward. Like, in a very general sense, that
Mm-hmm.
would be my expectation when someone uses the term trauma informed. You may also see variations of this descriptor. There is a whole movement, I feel like, among clinicians to use different language here. So you might see trauma informed, you might see trauma competent, you might see trauma sensitive or
Yep.
trauma responsive. These are all terms that people are using to try to get at the fact of like, we are aware of trauma and how it affects us.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to address it,
Okay.
not in a way that is figuring it out.
Right.
There's a sense when we use terminology like trauma competent, it sounds so final.
That's a great point. It does sound very final.
It
Yeah.
sounds like we've got our degree in it.
Yep.
Now we know, and we
And
know
we've
the exact
mastered
way
it.
to address it. We've mastered it. It's done. It's done. So I kind of steer away from the language of competence. But this is like such I'm like a word person, so this resonates with me. But I don't know if everyone thinks quite so intensely about this. But I might use terminology more like trauma responsive to just say like, hey, I'm aware and I'm going to adapt my practice to be sensitive and flexible with understanding how trauma has affected you.
That's great. We've been hearing in our circles, we've been hearing a lot more of the trauma sensitive and the trauma
Yeah.
responsive, in conjunction with the already established trauma informed. So that
Yeah.
makes sense.
My guess is that we're going to move more towards that language going forward to send that general message of like humility and responsiveness rather than like that finality of like I've made it and there's nothing left more to learn.
There's always more to
There is
learn.
always more to learn. Yes.
So, can you explain to us how that differs from someone who's telling on their website or on their social media accounts that they are adoption competent? Because I know that there are some differences there with that language.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I really
Okay.
don't know what the difference is. I wouldn't use that language to describe myself, even though like my practice is exclusively with
Right.
foster and adoptive families. I
Mm-hmm.
don't use the terminology like adoption informed or adoption competent. My guess is that when people use it, they're trying to express that they have experience in adoption, like as a
Okay.
professional.
Okay.
I don't think that it's something that we need to necessarily look for or like not consider someone if they don't describe themselves in that way. I think it might just be trying to let people know that they have worked with adoptive families and they're familiar with some of the unique challenges that adoptive families face.
Okay. So, when parents are trying to figure out if their potential therapist that they're considering is going to be up for the challenge of handling a child or a family's trauma,
Yeah.
adoption story, foster story, what are some of the key things that parents can look for either when they're reviewing a website or reviewing their social media accounts, trying to track down that information? Like you've
Yeah.
already mentioned that trauma sensitive, trauma responsive, those kinds of words. What are
Yeah.
some of the things that they could look for that would help them start to get to the right path?
Yeah. I think the paths that you mentioned already are good indicators of the vibe, at least, of a person, like
Hmm.
how their website, their social media, the type of messages that they're putting out there. But a lot of really good clinicians don't even have those things,
Right.
or maybe have like a static website, but aren't doing social media and like putting out content. So
Hmm.
honestly, I think the best predictor of determining like some sense of goodness of fit would be like talking to people. Find out who the people around you have gotten help from and ask them about it. Don't just get a recommendation of like, who did you use? Ask them
Hmm.
questions like, oh, you liked them? Why? What did you like about them? What was helpful? What did you learn through it? How did you feel before and after you met with them on a regular basis? What was it like experientially? What did your kids say about it?
Hmm.
Asking those types of questions, I think are probably the most helpful. And then I would say like most helpers, most clinicians will offer 15 minutes at least, sometimes a lot more. I typically offer a lot more of like an intro conversation to help families discern goodness of fit.
Okay, so that would be like a consultation or an interview where
Yeah,
parent is kind of interviewing and asking the questions that concern me or, would make me want to.
yeah, it's like honestly, I compare this, and this is probably not a fair comparison, but I will say to people like choosing a therapist is kind of like choosing a hairdresser. I mean, okay, not a totally fair comparison, except I will say I'm very discerning with my hairdresser. But um,
And
someone
our hairdressers get a lot of our
do a lot of
stuff.
therapy. Do a lot of therapy. That's right. That's right. They're therapeutic in and of themselves. There may be a hairdresser that you, Tracy, love,
Hmm.
but you have curly hair,
Right.
and they may not be good for me. So just because someone close to you really loved this particular clinician and this helper does not mean that they are necessarily a good fit for you and your family. So these intro calls I like to put it this way. I want families to know that they want to be in the room with me. Like, do they want to be in a room with me? I
Mm-hmm.
am not a good fit for every person. I have a unique way of communicating. I'm high
Mm-hmm.
in structure, I'm high in nurture, but like some people that doesn't resonate with.
Right.
And that's okay. I don't need to be all things for all families. Like there's a lot of helpers out there. So these intro calls are a way for you to like ask some questions, but you don't have to have all the right questions. You can all it just kind of gauge like, how do I feel on the phone with them? Do I feel like they're bossy and like they're telling me what to do already and they don't even know me? Or are they like leaving me wanting more? And I'm like, I can't wait to talk to them again.
Yeah.
Like, what is their presence like? What's the sound of their voice like? Can you imagine your child connecting with them? Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
just, it's very experiential. Like, there's a lot of research that tells us that what's called the therapeutic alliance, which is that relationship we have between clinician and the helpee, that
Mm-hmm.
like connection, it's
Mm-hmm.
more predictive of transformation than the model of therapy or any other like part of the therapeutic process. It's that relationship.
Fascinating. That's
Yeah. I mean,
fascinating.
it
Well,
makes
because
sense, right?
yeah, it really does. We're such relational creatures.
Yes.
We need that. Yeah, that
Yes.
initial connection.
That's right. That's right. So that's important to kind of test from the get go to say, like, can I imagine being in a room with them?
Right.
Can I imagine growing and learning with them? Do I want to? But if
Right.
you're like, I don't know,
Mm,
talk to someone else. And that's
right.
okay. Yeah.
One thing I've found to be incredibly valuable in working with different practices over the years is when they preemptively say to me, so let's have this first meeting. And if after the first meeting or two you feel like this isn't a great fit, we've got lots of other practitioners in this
Yes.
practice that might be a better fit for you. And kind of setting that standard in advance of
Yeah.
saying, we recognize not everybody's going to be a good fit with everybody else. So
That's right.
we've got options for you, and we are committed to your healing and your thriving. And so we're willing to offer you the other options. I get very wary when a practitioner is kind of not open to that conversation, not open to, kind of it's my way or the highway. Is there someone else we can add to the team? Seems to be like a threat to them or seems to be undermining them in some way. That's almost always a red flag for me.
I completely agree. That would be a red flag for me for any professional who has that mentality of like my way or the highway. Like that's not comfortable for anybody. I think like the reality is practitioners want this too. Like
Right.
I don't want people to start and stop. Like that doesn't let me thrive and like feel successful in what I'm doing, which matters to me too. Like I want to help a family, but I also want to like feel good about what I'm offering and like enjoy what I'm doing every day. So offering that call, quite honestly, is like for the family's benefit and my own.
Right.
Because I don't want someone to start and then like figure out that this is not what they wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about there's a current awareness of the value of working with therapists and practitioners who have lived experience themselves.
Yeah.
So, adult adoptees who identify as adult adoptees in their practice of therapy. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what you perceive those valuable contributions to be? And then I've got a link that we can share for families that are interested in something like
Yeah.
that.
I think it is valuable to give our children in particular exposure to people with lived experience in adoption, as an adoptee, not just as an adoptive parent or maybe someone who's like worked in the adoption field or something like that. I also think it's valuable to us as parents to learn from adult adoptees and pay attention to what their lived experience has been so that we can learn from them and continue to do better as
Mm,
parents in general, like
yeah.
for all of us generationally, systemically. At the same time, I don't think it is essential to access someone with lived experience. And that's across the board with like every type of challenge. if we could only go to clinicians who had lived experience in the thing that we are struggling with, we would become a very siloed field of clinicians.
That's a great point. Yes.
And I don't think that's healthy. I think that we should be a bit more holistic in our care, a bit more integrated. So, like, yes, like giving our children access to adult adoptees, awesome. Like, just that's a great idea. Also, giving our kids access to people of the same gender. Like, this is a field that it's a lot of women in this field. And you may want to seek out a clinician who's a man. That may really matter. Or maybe the same color, the same race as your child, the same ethnic background. Maybe someone who just experiences like a transracial family. Maybe the clinician is not the same race as your child, but maybe they have some experience with that because they also live in a transracial family. Maybe you want a particular age. Maybe you're looking like maybe you've got a teenager and you want to have someone a little younger who like the teenager might resonate a little more with instead of seeing the clinician as more like a peer to their parents. There's a lot of things that we may consider when we're looking at clinicians, and being an adult adoptee is definitely a big one. And that's valuable, but it's not everything.
Right. That's great. If you are interested, listeners, in finding an adult adoptee therapist or practitioner, you can go to creatingafamily.org, go to the adoption topics landing site, and we have an entire resource page that we've titled Adoptee Voices. And within that page, there's links and resources to many such organizations and practitioners. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know that Creating a Family, talk about adoption, foster care, and kinship care, is now in video format on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel simply at Creating a Family and catch every episode from today forward when you do so. You can also keep an eye out for which Tigger mug I'm going to be using from week to week. Here's today's mug, wired for another day. Thanks so much, and now back to the interview. Can you list some of the most common models of therapy and treatment that adoptive, foster, or relative caregiver families should at least be aware of, even if they don't fully understand the total definition and actual implementation of each of these, just to help them get like a working knowledge? We're also going to list all of these in our show notes for families to go ahead and, capture the title of the model and do their research and help them become self-informed.
Sure. I'll start by saying like the models that I'm aware of it's definitely not an exhaustive list. Like this is a list that could be updated monthly as different thinkers out there and practitioners even name their own practice. There's a lot of practitioners who are starting to like kind of figure out what their practice is unique, how it's unique, and like naming that. So this list is changing and dynamic like all the time. But right. I think some of the more popular, like well-established, long-term recognized, I guess, if we can call it that, models would include dyadic developmental psychotherapy. That's basically a model that I think Dan Hughes was probably the original kind of founder of that. And the word dyadic is kind of the key to this. It just means like this is therapy that's for a parent and a child. It's like looking at that dyad. It's looking at that relationship. So dyadic developmental psychotherapy. Theraplay is a very well-known, very relational, engaging therapy that's great for younger kids. Narrative therapy is focusing on life stories, experiences. EMDR, that's a well-recognized trauma treatment that is accessing like bilateral stimulation. For those of you who like, those are big psychology words. I know that like, what does that mean? It basically is like bringing in ways to stimulate their body physically using both sides of their brain in a way to help them in the physical and emotional repair of trauma. PCIT, which is parent-child interaction therapy. That's another one that is like literally having a clinician scaffold and support interactions between a parent and a young child. Trauma focused CBT. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy in and of itself. That's a model. But trauma focused CBT is specifically a trauma based, relational based model that's directed at children in the family system. Something important to note that comes up a lot as people reach out to us is that TBRI, trust based relational intervention, is not a therapy model. So we often have people contact us and say, do you do TBRI therapy? And I will respond and say, I am a TBRI practitioner. I have gone through the program to learn TBRI. I practice TBRI, but TBRI is a parenting model. It is not a therapy model. So if you're looking for a TBRI therapist, know that you will struggle to find one. And if anyone says they're a TBRI therapist, you may want to ask some more questions because it's not a therapy model. It is a parenting model that therapists can support.
Okay. What does that look like when you say that therapists can support?
They can help parents in executing, like figuring out how to practice TBRI in their family. So TBRI has come a long way in becoming very accessible to parents. There's a lot of like really good clinicians and programs and content creators that will help like put stuff out there on what TBRI is and like how to do it as a family, what it looks like. A lot of parents struggle with translating that content into like, what does this look like with my kid and my family?
Right.
So a therapist can help with that translation.
Great.
They can teach the strategies too. Like they can do that. But they can also help families who are like, I know what TBRI is. I've gone to conferences or like I read the accounts or I read the books or whatever it might be. But I don't know, like, how do I do TBRI when my kid just lied to me about stealing?
Right. Okay.
How do I respond in a TBRI congruent way when my kids are in the playroom and they're throwing toys at each other? Like whatever it might be that family is facing, it can be very helpful to have another brain to help you figure out how do you translate the knowledge that you have about TBRI into practice in your specific family with your children.
Well, that leads us quite well into the next question. When should therapy or a therapeutic relationship involve just us as the adults and the therapist, or us with the child, or the whole family? Kind of parse some of that out for us.
This is such a hard question to figure out.
I know.
This is really,
we're not
really
throwing
hard.
You softballs today.
But no, I mean, I wrestle with this a lot. I mean,
Yep.
I only see children with a parent present.
Okay.
That is my model. But that does not mean that is the only helpful model. So there are a lot of different ways to do this. Sometimes meetings with parents only could be enough.
Mm-hmm.
And you may prefer that. You may decide, like, you know what, maybe you decide, I want to meet with the therapist first to make sure that like we even want to stick with them before I even introduce my child to them. Like that's not a bad idea.
Right. Especially if you have a child that struggles with attachment and
like that's a good idea. But there are some therapists who only work like with kids who may not see parents. And in those cases, I'd say, hey, good work can be done. Don't write them off. But partnering with parents, engaging parents in the process matters. So a good question to ask any clinician is, how do you partner with parents? How are you going to help me be a better parent? Like, how am I involved in this process? Right. Because ideally, a clinician should be working themselves out of a job. That is the ideal. We should be wanting to equip parents to be therapeutic parents as best they can. so that we work ourselves out of a job and we're a distant memory to their kids. I want the kids to be closer and stronger relationships with their parents. And if they remember me when they're 30, that's great. But I'm also really okay if they don't.
Okay. That makes really good sense, especially in the field where we're listening to parents talk about their attachment concerns and, do I have this secure attachment with my child? And if I don't, where do I go to help to make it more secure?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So I think like asking that question of any clinician, how do you typically partner with parents and how can parents be involved is a good question to ask. And you may be emotionally at the point that you're like, please let me just drop my kid off and sit in the waiting room and scroll on my phone. And it's not what I do, but I am so sensitive and empathetic to that. And I get it. And if that's the case, like start there. Just start there. Just find someone who will let you do that and start there and grow to the point where maybe you can be more involved if you need that type of respite and some help, but you're not ready to engage yet. That would make sense to me.
So you've alluded to it a couple times, but I'd like to maybe bring it kind of down to a little bit more of a listing structure. What are some of the very specific questions parents can ask when they pick up that phone or when they submit that contact form? Just kind of a starter few to get the ball rolling. And then let's also talk about some of the questions that they can ask themselves or the therapist once they've met with that therapist a couple times.
Definitely the one about engaging the parents, I think, is like probably the most critical. I would avoid yes, no questions.
Okay, good tip.
So rather than saying like, do you have experience in X, Y, or Z?
Right.
I want to ask something like, can you tell me about your experience with X, Y, or Z? And see what the clinician shares with you.
Right.
What do they see as like their best thing that they want to share with families? Like that is kind of telling of like, what do they use as the way to like promote what makes them who they are? You might want to ask like, what is unique about your practice? How long typically do families stay with you? That might help like get at what the like cycle of therapy looks like. And if they see themselves as like a long-term solution or a short-term solution. Certainly logistics, I would say, like I encourage families to literally like look up what the drive is. Ask about what parking is like. Ask for photos of the waiting room and the clinical room. That sounds like kind of silly.
No, it does not.
To me, the physical space matters a lot.
Yep.
So like I don't know if I've ever actually had a family like ask me for photos of like my clinical space, but I can say I pay a lot of attention to it and I'm ready if they do because I feel like it matters so much. So like considering even that, like what is the experience like? What could we expect it looking like if we were to work with you? And certainly like I wouldn't discount some of the more logistical, practical questions of like, what is the cost? What does this cost us? One that someone shared with me recently that I've kind of added to my list of good questions to ask is when do you typically see families? Because there was a family who started with a clinician and like felt really good about the relationship. And then the clinician told them that she only saw people like during business hours. Like typical business hours and like finished her day by like 4 p.m. every day. And that just like didn't work for this particular family. So like, don't be afraid to ask some like very logistical type of questions too of like, what is the cost? Is there any sort of like financial assistance offered or like discounts for families in financial need if that's an issue for you? And asking about like typical hours and like how hard is it to get appointments and do you book far out?
Waiting list.
Yeah, like those questions matter experientially too.
Yeah. And I think I so appreciate you bringing up the logistics part of this conversation because these are parents and caregivers that are already experiencing
Yeah.
pretty high degrees of stress and
Yeah.
anxiety about their kids' safety or their kids' ability to thrive, and adding more stress about parking or how to pay for parking, or do we get our tickets validated for parking, or does insurance cover this? And if it doesn't cover it, what benefits do you offer to help families access it anyway? There's already so much stress around
Oh, so much.
being a humble parent that says, I need help, I need more.
Yeah.
And yeah, I so appreciate that you brought that up. And I think parents should feel so empowered to say, yeah, what does your waiting room look like and feel like? Is it going to feel like the waiting room of a hospital, or is it going to feel like a soft haven where I can let down and relax and get the best out of me and get the best out of my kid in order to make this productive and healthy? So yeah, logistics, but I'm with you on the aesthetics. Those things I always say I need my house to be functional, but I also need it to be pretty. And I feel the same way about therapeutic relationships. I need that to be a functional space, but I also need to feel soft and welcomed in that
Yeah.
space. So I appreciate
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
that
It
out.
matters. I think that matters. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, it won't matter to everyone. But if it does matter to you, you should feel free as a parent or a caregiver and empowered to go ahead and ask it.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is it helps you to prepare your kid. So,
Yep.
a lot of parents will say to me, how do I even introduce this to my child? If you have a child who hasn't experienced therapy or counseling before, that part of like prepping your kid is anxiety producing as a parent, to be like, I don't want them to think that like they're a problem that needs to be fixed. I don't want them to think we're taking them to like another doctor for testing. They might have been through all of that again. And like, how do I even introduce this to my kid? And having some of that information about what the experience is like, or having photos, will help you as a parent to prep your kid more fully and more comfortably. Yeah.
Yeah, like my kids recently had to attend their first funeral. And so I, on the
Oh,
way, said, hey, here's what we're going to do. This is what the space is going to look like.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this is who's going to talk. You don't have to feel the need to interact with anybody that you don't know. We're not here for us. We're here to support the person who's grieving. And so I kind of gave them like the lay of the land in advance. And I said, and any questions that you have, feel free to ask me now. And then when we get back in the car after the graveside service, you can ask me anything you need to know. And I feel like when we can prepare our kids in those ways for the logistics, for the environment, for
Yeah.
things that they might consider, and they might think if they don't have space or freedom to voice it, they might think that's a stupid question. I would never ask that. But giving them the information in advance preemptively, they can say whatever they need to say in therapy, and it's okay
Yeah.
because that's a safe
Yeah.
space to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about some of our families in our community are raising kids that may have been abused sexually or experienced some sort of sexual inappropriateness, whether it was actual abuse or not. They may have questions about whether or not the child was abused sexually. Are there special considerations or questions that parents should be asking if that's what's maybe driving them to therapy?
I mean, ideally all therapists would be comfortable with addressing this.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the case though, and I'm sympathetic to that. So that like I could be wrong. I'm not sure on this.
Mhm.
I think it's worth in that intro conversation sharing that
Mhm.
you don't have to share any specifics, but
Right.
sharing even generally, like we have a concern that our child may have experienced a history of sexual abuse, or that, I have a concern that my child may be acting out sexually, whatever the case may be. And asking, like I suggested earlier, asking like, what has your experience been with families who are dealing with this, who are navigating this? And that may give you a sense of like how comfortable the clinician is, him or
Mhm.
herself, in even using the language,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, just at the very entry level, like, how does the clinician even respond to your question? If you sense that there's like, I don't know, hesitation,
Mhm.
then maybe you say like, okay, this might be a great clinician for other things, and maybe we access them for other things, but maybe we need to find someone else who might be more comfortable with like talking about very vulnerable and sensitive things. Because the reality is like sexuality, a lot of people do have come with like their own history and things that are entering the room that might make those conversations a little bit more weighted. But my hope is that clinicians who are familiar with trauma, who are experienced in this world, unfortunately likely have had experience with serving families who are navigating this.
That's really, yeah. It's a
Yeah.
really hard topic for a lot of families to pick up the phone and talk about.
A lot of humans.
Yeah.
Like this is just this is like across the board, just like really hard. It's like it's a different kind of brokenness. So I get that it's like very very sensitive for both parents. Oh God, gosh, I shouldn't even use the word both because it's like for parents, for children, for teenagers, for the clinicians. Like this is just really hard stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding someone who makes your family feel safe to
Yeah.
explore the intricacies of that pain and that difficulty is paramount.
Yeah, who builds the safety and also gets the fact that this is really hard to talk about.
Yep. Yep.
Who gives you like a long on ramp,
Yeah.
so
That's
that
great.
you have your own kind of like that gives you enough space to work up to like being able to use specific words. Some people are like really good at that.
Right.
Some people will enter into these conversations and use all the words with no
Yep.
hesitation.
Yep. Yep.
I don't even need to say the words because I know people
Yep.
might be listening with lots of little ears. So I'm not going to use the words here. But some
Right.
people are
Right.
way more comfortable with the language. And some parents need a longer on ramp to even recognize what they're bringing into the room and how they were raised and all the impacts on them of like how we talk about these things. So just like sensitivity all around for everybody in the room and for the
Yeah.
people who are not even in the room but play a part in this conversation.
Right. Right. And I think the only other thing I would add to that is look for a practitioner who will speak with hopefulness for the long term of the journey, because these kids can heal and they can go on to thrive and just live vibrant, full lives. And we want that for
Yeah.
our kids. And when we suspect that that may have been part of their history, we want to find someone that will imbue them with that same hope.
Yes, I would like to say that goes without saying, but maybe it doesn't go without saying.
I don't, in my experience talking to parents who've had therapeutic relationships, I don't think that that always will go without saying. I think
Oh,
we do have to find we have to find that ground where we are sensing that hope from a practitioner.
yeah,
There's just a lot of stigmas around it, and obviously therapists are not immune to some of those stigmas, and we
yeah,
want to make sure that the priority is making sure that our kids know that we've got their back and that there is hope.
yeah. I mean, that would apply to every challenge,
Right.
right? Like if you don't, I like the way that
Yep.
you worded it. I think you said, if we don't receive that hope, I think was the word you just
Yeah.
used.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's actually key because my hope would be that every clinician like has hope for healing and change. If they did not, then I'd be like, why are you doing your job? Like that's like the basis of our work, right?
Right.
That there's
Right.
like the change is possible.
Yeah.
That, transformation is possible. If that wasn't true, then we wouldn't have jobs. So
Right.
like my guess is that every clinician holds that hope, but maybe it's not getting communicated as readily or not communicated in a way that you're receiving it. So that's worth paying attention to. Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of check in with yourself how you feel about that when you do
Yeah.
about those things.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And our kids will pick up on how we feel about it and how we understand it or how we've received it. Our kids will pick that up. So it's real important that we pay attention to those. But hope for, again, as you wisely pointed out, hope for any of the challenges that bring us to therapy. We want to sense from the people that are going to be influencing and speaking life into and over our kids that life and hope are there and within grasp.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to pause here for a minute and say a special thank you to the Jockey Being Family Foundation. Thanks to their partnership, we are able to offer a library of 15 free online courses, all designed to strengthen your family. If you check out the library of titles at bit.ly/JBF support, you'll see the variety of topics that we offer, and you can take one or all 15. Go to bit.ly/JBF support. That's bit.ly/JBF support. And thank you to the Jockey Being Family Foundation. Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about home-based therapy. It's not as common and not as many people know about it. So if you could kind of tell us what it is and then what you would see as the advantages or disadvantages to pursuing this kind of therapy.
Sure. I mean, very simply put, home-based therapy would be when the practitioner who's helping you is entering into your space rather than you leaving your space and coming into theirs. I think it could be particularly helpful when you're coming into therapy because of challenging behaviors. There's a higher likelihood that your clinician is going to see the behaviors in the child's natural environment, right? Like they're going to see
their natural habitat.
That's right. That's the language I was going for. I was like picturing the accent, saying it and everything. Yeah, I think there's more likelihood that the clinician is going to see those behaviors at home rather than like in the clinical space. In some areas, like in our state, in Pennsylvania, the state can offer home-based services. So like if you go on medical assistance, if you're able to do that, that's a way to access home-based services. I don't know what the case is everywhere, but I know in Pennsylvania, that's a possibility. And I'm sure there's third-party providers as well, but it's, like you said, less common. But there are also some things to consider. If you're like, maybe at first you're like, yes, that's what I want. I want someone to come in and see what I'm dealing with and tell me I'm not crazy, right? Like, and tell me that this is actually a problem or whatever.
Right.
At the same time, the other side would be going to a different place can be very helpful. Removing yourself from the home environment, which may be very chaotic, even if you only have maybe a single child, but especially if you have more than one child, that home environment can be really chaotic. Leaving your space, driving somewhere, like the drive itself can provide a bit of a buffer and space to get you ready for whatever is going to happen when you get there. It can also provide really useful time to debrief after a session.
Right.
There's something very valuable about car rides. Like most children, not all children, I know for those who have children over 5 foot who can sit in the front, maybe like this might be different, but like you're not typically getting eye contact when you're driving your child. That might open up some conversations that are harder to have at the dinner table or at bedtime. That distance might actually be helpful for some conversations. Some kids do really, really well with having a space that it becomes like, this is where I do this work, right? And they're able to focus and do it there in a way that they may not be able to do in their living room.
Right.
It can be hard then to translate that to home. So like that's where partnering with parents can be really helpful to say like, okay, they're doing really well here. How do we help translate this into other contexts, into, the home and school and peer relationships and all of that. But I think there can be a lot of value in leaving your home space to do it as well.
Yeah. So if you are looking for a therapist to come to your home, one of the resources that we've found as an organization that can be helpful is familycenteredtreatment.org. we'll put the link in the show notes, and families can investigate that and do some research to see if that might work for them. I love here's the advantages, here's the disadvantages. There are definitely things for us to consider. I think if access is an issue for you, or mobility in and out of your home is an issue for you, or if the challenging behaviors only ever occur in your home and you just need an extra set of eyes to say, like you said earlier, hey, this is not atypical. It can be managed and healed. And that would be a great time to consider home-based therapy. But I do really resonate with your thoughts on the neutral territory, as we call it here at our house, of a separate place to go.
Yeah.
Or therapy. But that leads really well into a conversation. Since the pandemic, the onset or advent of telehealth has just blown up. It's just so accessible now and so available to families. I would imagine then that there's probably some of the similar pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages to telehealth. But because it is so popular, could you talk a little bit about when it can be effective for a family, and how might we, as parents and caregivers, increase its potential for effectiveness in our homes, if that's the option?
Yeah. I asked a colleague a similar question as we were like in that transition from like when we went from all telehealth and then we were like restarting kind of in person. And there was a lot of like in between, in that in between space. I asked a colleague this and I loved her response. She said, telehealth is 100% better than nothing.
That's bing. Wow.
And I have held on to that because I don't like telehealth as a practitioner or as a receiver. Right now, while this isn't a therapy appointment with us, I recognize that, but we're on Zoom right now. Right. We're on Zoom. I can't see the rest of your body.
Yep.
I don't hear the sounds in the room that you are also experiencing. If there's a buzz of a light or like a child, whatever it might be, right? Like I'm not experiencing that with you. There are a lot of things that you are experiencing and that I'm experiencing that are siloed and we're not sharing.
Right.
I can't see if your foot is bouncing. I don't feel that with you. If you were in the room with me, I would have way more information about what's going on for you that I'm just missing.
Right.
Now, sometimes, like for a podcast like this, we have to do it this way. Well, I guess we could do it in person, but like that would be really challenging. Like this is the platform. So I get the fact that like sometimes telehealth is like the only way or the most logistically convenient way. Like it works, right? But be aware of what's being missed.
Right.
I would also say like your question at the end, which I really liked, of like, how can we make it more effective, right? Get childcare for any other kids.
Yeah, that's such a great tip. I would never have thought of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of parents, well, I've learned this through experience. I think a lot of parents are like, oh, if we can do it on telehealth, that we don't have to get a babysitter. Right? Which is like true. Like that is true. Like if you're coming to therapy in my office, you do need to get a babysitter for your other kids who are not coming with you. Like I get that. And that saves money to not have to get a babysitter. It saves you time and effort and all of the things, right? However, you will be very distracted if you're doing a telehealth appointment and you are aware that in the room next to you, your kids are watching a movie that ends in 20 minutes.
Right.
And I have no awareness of that. I'm not feeling that. And you may be like hearing them calling your name and then feeling divided that like you have to respond to them. Like, of course you have to respond to them. And like, it just makes it a little, you may be a lot less present in the appointment. So like, even if the telehealth is for your child, if you're going to be part of it and like wanting to be present or needing to be present in any sort of way, like make sure the other kids in your home, like have a grown up.
Yeah.
or a responsible person so that you can be freed up and have the capacity to engage.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a really good, and that's actually good advice for any of the therapeutic models that we follow. When you can set yourself free from all of those other concerns
Oh,
to be
yeah.
present, whether it's present with your child or present just you and the therapist alone while you're learning tools to, cope with or manage your child and their behavior or
It
whatever.
definitely applies in like,
Present,
yeah, home based. I would say that's a great idea to have like childcare for whoever's not involved if you're doing the home based. Another like practical tip, whether it's therapy in person, telehealth, or home based, would be like put your phone on do not disturb if you're able to.
yeah, yeah,
If you're not able to because you have kids at home and like you don't want to just be like unavailable, if like
right,
you're a parent and you're still like aware, if both parents are in the therapy, like maybe just have one of you have your phone like
yeah,
accessible.
yeah,
There is nothing more distracting than hearing the vibrating like notifications in the
right,
room
right,
from multiple people,
right, right,
right?
yeah,
And we're used to it. Like this
yeah.
is a part of our digital life. Like this is the age we live in, but it's so much easier to focus on like what we're experiencing collaboratively in the moment if we're not also feeling the demands of what's happening outside the room or potentially happening outside the room.
Yeah. Well, this was excellent. And I so appreciate the time that you took with us today, Kelly. I appreciate your passion for seeing families heal. That's been my experience with you in all the years that I've known you. So I appreciate that consistency and that diligence. And I appreciate the very candid pros and cons of all of these things that we've talked about today, helping parse that out for families. If you are a family who is looking for therapeutic services, please feel free to check out the therapy resources page on our website at creatingafamily.org. And we'll list some of those things in our show notes. And thank you, Kelly Radenbush from the Sparrow Fund, for your input and insight today. It was greatly appreciated.
Thanks for including me.